Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel today. We're going to give folks just a quick second to pop in. We're very excited to talk to you guys about today about how libraries can work within university communities to promote open science or to support it. The numbers are still fluctuating a little bit. But I think we might actually be able to just go ahead and dive in. So hi, everyone. Um, Welcome to this discussion. We've got a great set of panelists today. And I think that might be actually where we start off. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, talk about their role on campus, and also their definition of open science, because one of the things that we often see is that depending on how you define open science, depending on what practices you put under that umbrella, that can really shape how you engage with those practices. So why don't we go ahead and start with Marla, and then whoever would like to go after that.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Marla Hertz, and I am the Research Data Management Librarian at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I have a PhD in microbiology and spent about 15 years doing basic science research and then went into more clinical human subjects research, doing field work, and then moved into librarianship in 2022. So now I work in the Office of Scholarly Communications here at UAB. And my perspective on open science has really been shaped by this combination of my background in basic science research and my experience working as a librarian dealing with data management and open science types of issues. I define open science as an overarching philosophy and as a movement aimed at increasing transparency throughout the research process, including things like sharing data and software and tools and final publications. But also creating an infrastructure that fosters those connections between the outputs. So repositories, persistent identifiers, standards, and things like that. And I'm looking forward to sharing my views with you today. I'll pass it over to Levi.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Glad that we can all be here today. My name is Levi Dolan, and I'm the data librarian for the health sciences at Yale University's medical library. I recently moved to this library. I was previously at Indiana University's medical school, and that's how I started working with some of the folks on this panel a little bit. So yeah, in my role, I'm mainly working with people in the biomedical field all across the board, from medical students to PIs to postdocs, that type of audience. And when I think about how I would define open science, I think I'm still thinking about a definition for myself, but I would say definitely I emphasize in my mind concepts that have to do with recording the decisions that you make during research and then organizing them and making choices about how you're going to record them to use tools that people, kind of regardless of their context, can hopefully broadly interpret what you did and enhancing practices towards that end. So that can involve the choice of tools that you're using, the platforms that you're sharing on, the way that you're doing publications. I just think of it as kind of the end-to-end, as you do your work, making choices, kind of a perspective. So I'll end there. I'll pass it to Daria.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Daria Orleska. I'm a solo data librarian at Western Michigan University, which is an R2 in southwestern Michigan. I've been in my role for about 6 years, and I was the first hire within the data librarian role. Similar to Marla, I also have a human subjects background. My background is in psychology, and then I ran NIH studies for a few years around human subjects research before I went into library school. So it's definitely a perspective that I am most comfortable with dealing with human subjects in this context. When I think of open science, I think of course, what Levi and Marla have already talked about. So data management activities, like how are you documenting and what decisions are you making to deposit data to make it the most accessible to other folks. But I also think of open science as maybe transforming things that we already have in our collection into data. That is now more readily available to people to reuse and to find, and for them to consider how like secondary data can really fit into their research projects, which is more or less resource intensive than maybe collecting something from scratch. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to pass it on to Tim.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad we could all get together today. I am a professor of human genetics at Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine in Richmond, Virginia. I'm also the director of the VCU Data Science Lab, so kind of on the other, kind of adjacent to the libraries. And so I think I'm not the odd man out here in this panel, but here to provide a different perspective. When I think of open science, everything I agree with what the other panelists have said, but what we try to stress to students is there's a different way of thinking about your research in terms of, what are your products of research? It's kind of no longer just your publication. Maybe think of your publication as an advertisement of your research, but your products are everything that some of the panelists have mentioned, such as your making your data available, making your code available, making your protocol available, making other versions of your manuscript available. And so just having a different mind frame about what your research products are and making them accessible to anybody and everybody who wants to access them, which is good for science, but it's also good for the researcher because they make the research more impactful. Do we have anybody left? I lost count.
I haven't gone yet.
Lena,
I'm
thank you.
Lena. I'm the Senior Data Management and Research Impact Librarian at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra University and Northwell Health. Northwell Health is a large health system in the New York City area. So in addition to serving the medical students and faculty, I also serve clinicians and clinical researchers. I tend to think of open science in my job as, a lot of the activities we do can fall under the heading of open science, like the workshops we teach and so on. But it is or is not a helpful framing device, depending on who I'm presenting to. When I present to residents, open science is often like the last thing from their mind, even if I'm talking about reproducibility and writing good methods. Talking to them more about how this is what journals are looking for and this is going to help you get published resonates a lot more. Whereas when I present to our, bench scientists, they'll be much more familiar with the concept. So often that's, even if I'm incorporating what you might consider open science concepts into everything, it is or is not helpful to really talk specifically about open science as a frame or not.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for that. For the folks who are listening in, if you have thoughts that you'd like to share in the chat, feel free to go ahead and share them. Folks right now are sharing where they're calling in from. If you have a question for the panel as the panel goes on, please use the Q&A function that's at the everybody's Zoom is a little bit different, but usually it's at the bottom. There's a little box that has a question mark or something in it. If you click on that, it'll open a menu that lets you put in questions for the panelists. I'm going to moderate the session, and so I'll sprinkle in some questions from you guys as we go through. But I think just to kick things off, I'm curious from folks who are interested in sharing, how would you describe the culture around open science or open scholarship or open research at your institution?
So I can start off. At VCU, so open science and kind of the adjacent term reproducibility kind of fall under the umbrella of data science. And so those topics are taught to graduate students in particular at our university under under our data science courses and workshops that we do. In terms of the culture, we're a heavy research institution, and faculty know that these things are important. Open science is important. Reproducibility is important. It's hard to engage them with those concepts. But what we found out is students are very enthusiastic about this movement. They want to be a part of it. They think it's important. They think it's cool. It kind of gives them sort of more kind of they see it as value added to their research to participate in this movement. And so, a lot of our training focuses on getting the students engaged, and then the students actually get the faculty engaged. And so that's kind of the order of operations that we see in terms of kind of building a culture at VCU around open science. One more thing I would say is that kind of as the scale of research increases, we get bigger data, bigger collaborations, just not within our university, but other universities and internationally. I think students and faculty realize that these open science reproducibility methods go hand in hand with the increase in scale because they provide those modern computational methods where you can actually more efficiently collaborate, communicate, and share information with all your collaborators and everybody on the research project that needs to see this information. So that's just a general sort of idea of kind of the kind of top level interests of these terms at VCU.
I will next. I think on my campus, there's unfortunately maybe not as much interest as on Tim's campus right now. I'm at an R2, so we have significantly less grants, like federally funded grants. So all the research that's happening and might get funding from somewhere else. So there's a lot of interest on like for open access, right? Like how are things going to be paid? How can the library support that? What journals to publish in, but less so with open science, which kind of brings an interesting problem for me as someone who educates about these kinds of topics. Like, how do I talk to people coming to my workshops about open science? And how do I make it digestible for them? Though I am seeing a lot of interest in things like open data and finding secondary data and reuse around that space. So I find that most of the conversations that I have with researchers here follow that kind of general pattern.
I'll go. So I'm at UAB. This is an R1 intensive research institute. We have an academic medical center. And so we're primarily funded by NIH. I think like 60% of our federal dollars come from NIH, and it's a heavy biomedical focus. So we're pretty much driven by whatever NIH is doing. I would say generally the culture on our campus is pretty pro open access, open science, with some hesitancy on like how to do it right. When I took a look at how UAB authors were publishing, I think about half of our authors were publishing open access already, and so that's been pretty consistent. And then when I do like trainings and webinars and things on campus, I often ask researchers what they think are the pros and cons to like data sharing. And a lot of them seem pretty willing to share data and see a lot of the benefits in it. But again, that's where they're concerned about, well, I never did this before, and I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. And it's usually something about participant confidentiality. They're working with real people and patients samples and data, and so they don't want to share that inappropriately. And then also intellectual property concerns. If they're dealing with some sort of industry partnership, how do they navigate that? And then of course there's always the like ownership of the data themselves. Like they spend a lot of time collecting this information, cleaning it up, and they kind of want that first take on analyzing the data and maybe not feeling very comfortable publishing the data right away. Maybe they wanted to get, 2 or 3 secondary analyses out of it. And so I have to work with people, on a case-by-case basis to kind of walk them through that and figure out the way to share responsibly.
As far as this cultural question, I'm interested in some of what y'all put in the chat. Marla, I saw you added that just calling it open science could be a disservice, and Amy threw in open research could often be more inclusive. That specific conversation is one that was had at my previous institution at Indiana University. We had a group that was mainly librarians, and then a very excited faculty member who initially called our group the Coalition for Open Science. And after, that was before my time there, but after talking to some of the other groups on campus, the faculty groups, one of them really was in favor of broadening it to calling it research instead of open science, open research. So that was a change that we made for that group. I don't know that it was actually led to better results for us, because in some ways, also as you broaden definitions, we did have some more people come from different areas of interest, but that also meant that kind of coming to agreement on what areas to focus on and what to do next was also became more difficult, right? So I think there could be a sweet spot that's different for every organization that has to do with what's your scale, how many people do you have, how many points of view are you representing, and can there be smaller teams within it, or are we all needing to work on an initiative together? And so that was just related to this cultural question, something that I think I specifically also encountered, I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting question around, what terminology do we use? It can be regionally defined as well. I think, if I remember correctly, over in the UK and possibly also into Europe, a lot of folks use open research. That's kind of the primary term that they use. So it can really broaden depending on, what departments are interested in this at your university. I know, Alina, you were saying that, depending on what actual tasks that people are engaged in at their institution can also impact what aspects of this are appealing to them, and perhaps also what terminology that they might use. And kind of thinking about that a little bit further, I'm curious about, some of you have mentioned I'm doing workshops and I'm doing trainings, and like you might talk about different groups that you're training and stuff like that. I also maybe heard a hint of some one-on-one like consultation and stuff that's happening. So I'm curious, at your institutions, what do you do with different departments at your institutions? How do you collaborate with them, and what do you think is important about those collaborations?
We do a lot of collaborations, where I am, we have a research institute, and they're most interested in, like, I guess, the more technical hard science topics, and we collaborate a lot there with, like, they have a research training department specifically, so we'll put on workshops with them. Also, our research compliance, grants management type of offices, if there are new NIH, especially since we're medical, directives that come out, often if they're related, especially to data or publishing, we'll help run the workshops, which they really appreciated. I think those offices are always overstretched, so it's a good opportunity. We do a lot of teaching already as librarians, so it's an opportunity for us to help them out and access their networks. And then, you know, as a data librarian, I'm also reliant on my colleagues who are liaison librarians to help get me in front of their researchers at their specific hospitals. You know, collaborations with specific researchers, especially researchers who run educational programs, is really important because, you know, faculty members who run residencies or run, for example, our postdoc program, they can either be super helpful or they can really block you from getting to present on these topics at all, depending on their particular interest. So cultivating those relationships is so important. You know, just I have a colleague who will um, literally just send, like, if he sees a news article that makes him think of like a program director, he'll just send it to them. You know, just maintaining those kinds of friendly relationships. You know, the next time you want to be in front of those residents, you want the program director to think fondly of you.
I think in terms of developing collaborations with other departments and other schools, you know, part of the challenge is for the data science lab, which I run, is marketing, just getting the word out that we're here and we're a resource, and possibly librarians have the same challenge. And so one of our strategies is attending departmental faculty meetings for the last 10 minutes and just letting people know what we do, and that open scholarship is something that we're is kind of within our wheelhouse, and we might have some techniques, methods that they might be interested in. Another thing is of course doing workshops and teaching lectures in other, say like a biostats course or a similar type of course where, you know, just one lecture we can introduce things like the OSF and reproducibility. What I found a lot is that um, people just people that come to the data science lab for consultation are already doing something, and they just want someone to talk to. And they just want a little bit of validation that, hey, you know, this is what we're doing. Are we doing anything dumb? Is there anything else we can do? And, you know, my philosophy is that's great that you've started, because you can't do everything all at once. Just you've got to start somewhere, and you'll build, you know, organically as time goes on, and maybe you'll get new students that introduce a new technique. And there's a paper by Jenny Bryant that was published a few years ago called Good Enough Practices in Scientific Computing, and it just advocates starting somewhere, having conversations with people, and that's what I see our role is in the data science lab right now, kind of at this kind of early kind of infancy of the open science movement, to just really have conversations with people, and that's what we really value.
I'll echo what Lena and Tim have been saying. So developing those partnerships is really hard. You know, you just have to constantly show up and find time and make yourself available and check in with those folks that you want to work with. Most of my relationship building happens with the Office of Research on my campus, and so I make sure to include our research officers in like annual kind of check-ins with me, like what are you seeing? What are the needs? How can I help? Our compliance officer is often involved in workshops that I put on as like to help answer questions and be made more available in a different space. So kind of leveraging their connections as well as the library's connections to get the message out. I will say I had a really great collaboration with our College of Health and Human Services, who were very interested in trying to promote more like avenues for finding data for research tools for their researchers. And we ended up working with the Office of Research and ICPSR, which is the Interconsortium for Social and Political Research, to put on a 3-series workshop on like figuring out what your data needs are, and then using ICPSR to find your open data, and then how do you analyze that data within ICPSR. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can take this, right? I find that putting on workshops several times in a semester is my venue for getting people in the door to come and have one-on-one consultations with me, because then they know my face and are more likely to approach me. But like Tim said, usually the people that come to you are the ones who are already doing the work. So constantly finding the people who aren't coming to you is the big challenge there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You go ahead, Levi.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna add a little to one of the things Lena said about working with research compliance. That has also been a good route for me at this institution and my previous institution. There's a lot, if you're not familiar, there are a lot of NIH grants that require responsible conduct of research training. And typically research compliance is going to be the office that heads that up. And a lot of times that means they have hours that they need to fill with somebody talking about something related to research training that has to do with ethics, and something in that space can often work well with things that you're doing in open science.
Yeah, I completely agree with all these tactics. It's a lot of work to find the people who need to know the information, and by using these central units or other units across campus, it really helps get to all those different subpopulations at your institution. For me, our Office of Scholarly Communication we're trying to make ourselves as a central unit that people associate with all things related to publishing. And we're very pro like open science and open publishing practices, like open educational resources and things like that as well. And I think like you have to think about like how to integrate open science in like I think about it in 3 different areas. One is that you have to have like either policy or guidelines that promote it. So asynchronous stuff, information on websites that people can find that gets them started. But then you also need to maybe offer optional types of workshops and training things for folks to come to. And then like the final step is to like fully integrate this into like required courses. Like you have to take this training before you do research, or you have to listen to the data management person talk at your class and things like that, really fully integrating it. And it gets harder, as you go up, because integrating it into a class is a lot harder than doing a workshop, which is a lot harder than just putting something on a random website or making a LibGuide if you're in a library. And so we've worked across campus on a lot of these areas. We've worked with our Office of Research to respond to things like the most recent federal public access policy updates that are ongoing right now. Done a lot there. I find that my workshops are also a lot better attended if I work with a unit that is like my intended audience, to have them help promote it, because we can shout as loud as we want from the library, but getting that buy-in from the department is like critical to getting people in the door. For example, I work with our Center for Clinical and Translational Sciences, our CCTS group, and that's actually a network of like over 20 institutions. So when I do a session for them, I'll have like 100 to 300 people in that session, which could never get those numbers on my own. The classroom is the hardest hurdle. It requires a lot of legwork, talking to individual professors. Even if you get in for one semester, you need to come back to them every year and remind them, hey, I did this. I thought it was great. Do you want me to come back? And so it's a lot of coming back to those people. But it's really helpful. And I think it shows the dedication. If you're going into an undergrad class, it means that you're really taking this seriously throughout their entire research career. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that. I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. That's great. I'm curious, Tim, as the kind of the researcher here, and the director of a lab, and thinking about your role across campus and also, within your lab. I'm curious where you see trade-offs in working across different departments and perhaps with librarians. What are some of the challenges that come up for you? What are some of those opportunities that you see?
Yeah, so the VCU Data Science Lab is not big. It's small, and we have a lot of affiliate members. We also have a student ambassador program, and so at times it feels like it's just me until I can sort of like generate some enthusiasm with kind of the other sort of kind of affiliate members of the lab and students too. And so that's always a challenge is coming up with, you know, maybe something new and something that people are kind of really passionate or motivated for, like doing an OSF workshop or teaching a lecture on AI or doing a workshop on AI or something like that. And so that's always a challenge. And then VCU is a big school. So we have a medical campus and an academic campus. My office is just on the medical campus, and so I spend most of my time there. And so trying to get myself over to the academic campus where the undergraduates are is challenging. And so it's kind of making connections with other kind of like-minded faculty and staff and librarians across the university who, you know, I can have as resources to help me kind of spread the news about a workshop or event. And so, you know, have a running sort of list of my go-to people there and my go-to librarians that I can always depend on kind of helping me out. So at VCU, we have our research data librarian who's Dr. Exner. Some of you may know her. She's really great, and she's always enthusiastic about helping and advertising and getting people in the door. So I've never had over 100 people like Marla attend any one of our events, but I definitely like to learn about those strategies. And so just to piggyback on something she said, I like the idea of the captive audience approach where you're required to attend. You know, I've never found that when I just shoot a blanket sort of university-wide email out even through our office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation, many people attend, but when it's targeted to a department or like a CCTR or CCTS or something like that, the turnout's a lot better. Crystal, did I even
Yeah.
approach an answer to your question?
No, I think that that's great. And I think that also leads into the next question that we'd prepared, which was, you know, what resources or recommendations would you make for someone that's trying to understand open science at their institution or trying to maybe even teach other people how to do it? I know, Elena, you've got the library carpentry demo. I think that would be actually a great time to start with that.
Sure, yeah. So the four of us librarians started working together because of a UCLA grant program that was working together to make carpentries courses for librarians about open science. The carpentries is basically a training program for people to learn computational research techniques. So there's ones about data. Someone help me out. It's data carpentries, library carpentries, and software carpentries. That's the one I'm missing. So this was specifically for library carpentries, which is aimed at librarians. And so Marla, Dari, and I created one about data management plans to help librarians who were just getting started with offering data management plan services to their researchers. So if you were offering consultations to researchers to help them writing data management plans, this was meant to be sort of like a quick start guide. So I'm going to share my screen and show this, and then I believe Levi's going to go next and show the course he worked on. So this is what the course looks like. And I'll put the link in the chat so you can explore on your own as well. This is the homepage, and you can see carpentry's courses are divided into different episodes. So ours has 5 different episodes. And the idea is this takes you through like what is a data management plan, what are resources you'll need to consult, how do you talk to a researcher, what's the DMP tool? The DMP tool is a website people commonly use for writing data management plans, and then how would you get started in launching a service? So if we go into one of these episodes to show what it looks like, there are learning objectives at the top, and then you go through the content. And this one has some videos. And then there are different activities. So this is meant to work either as like a self-taught course, or you could do it live taught if you had like an instructor in a library school or a training or something. So some of these are group activities and some are, you could do them on your own. There are also call outs. And then for these multiple choice tools, you can click to see the solution. So after you get through the DMP tool, you can see there's a section about common DMP issues and suggestions for the librarian about how to address them. And when you scroll down to the bottom, more quiz questions and then the key points section. So all the lessons basically look like this. Instructions, questions, you can test your knowledge. And the hope is, again, that this would be like a quick start guide. When the NIH policy was rolled out, we saw a lot of librarians kind of got this dumped on their plate by, a library director as like, now you're going to do DMP reviews. So this was a hope that, if someone had to suddenly take this on, they could consult this and kind of get the basics down. There's also a references page, which has these are sort of general references, and then there's links related to each episode. And that's basically it.
Cool, I'll switch over to me. So our lesson is less developed. It's still in the pre-alpha stage, but we did one on how to basically working with ORCID identifier, moving beyond just making one into kind of how you can connect other systems. So we, me and my two co-authors were librarians at Indiana University, and we based this on a PowerPoint workshop that we gave during a local conference for our medical school. So a lot of it was just us learning how to adapt that content to this type of a format and learning how to work with these, sort of interactive boxes and things like that inside of an R Markdown site. I had never built an R Markdown site before I did this. So a lot of my time was just learning how to do that. And we just had 3 episodes for ours, just creating an ORCID, tying that to open science. And I kind of mapped that to the findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, FAIR principles. And we kind of explain what you can do with it. We had a little activity for just seeing how there's actually many authors with the same name out there, right? So that's what ORCID helps you with. And just kind of talking about how you can actually integrate it and how that can give you some effectiveness in your research and being able to correctly tie the publications that you've made to the right person. So we kind of came up with the idea for this because what we were seeing was many researchers creating an ORCID and then not sharing it, not making it public, and then not populating it. So we wanted to kind of encourage the type of use that would allow us to see some of the real benefits for it. And our 3rd episode, Connecting Systems, was about actually going through and connecting it to Crossref, DataCite, and Dimensions. And then once you actually follow these steps, you can have your profile be automatically populated, and you will do spend less of your time just trying to manage your ORCID, and you can actually kind of take some of that work off your plate. So that's kind of what we were going for with that episode. Since then, since I wound up switching jobs, we kind of wound up leaving it at pre-alpha, but it may be integrated into a larger carpentries lesson that is being worked on at this time. And that's kind of where we're at with it.
Awesome. Thanks, Levi. Would you be willing to share the link to that in the chat as well for folks to explore?
Yes.
I think that's actually really useful for, the OSF you can put on your ORCID. And I think sometimes people don't really know what to do with it once they've made it. And I also love too that the library carpentries is focused on like, okay, you've been asked to do this new thing, right? That everybody's being asked to do that has federal funding. How do we make data management plans useful? How do we make it as painless as possible to actually integrate that into our workflow? So these I think are great resources. Are there others that folks like to use whenever they're reaching out to people who want to know more about open science?
I don't have an example, but I think both of these examples by Lena and Levi are great ways that librarians can come into any class, maybe a research methods class, and sort of give a half a lecture or a lecture on a topic that's really important. And these are really, really nice setups.
Yeah, I think like part of the reason why we did this is because the support around openness is so fragmented, and often it has to be because it is very discipline specific, like the way that you share things in one area might be just really different than another. But there are so many through lines as well. And so by having more courses like this that are just like available to more broadly, we're hoping that more people could use them and build off of them instead of having to feel like you're creating it from scratch every time that you're going back into the classroom or building some information.
A couple of years ago, I wrote some um, data management help articles for FASEB as a contract project. And they're still online. They're meant to be like introductions to a bunch of data management topics for researchers. I'd love to see people use them and adapt them for their own situations. I thought they were good. So, they're meant to be like short, plain language introductions to a bunch of different concepts. And FASEB never wound up doing much with them, so I would be happy to see someone else take the ball and reuse them.
Thanks for sharing that, Lena. Another thing I wanted to share today is there's this thing called the reproducibility clubs, and I found out about it because that's how the open science group at IU got started, was doing one of these clubs. So it might be something to look at if you're in a position where you're just wanting to start a conversation. You don't yet have a specific a tool or workflow that you want to implement, but you want to try to get some people together to talk about a topic related to open science. This is a method that has worked for some people.
Levi, I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to share also, we actually have our next reproducibility meeting tomorrow. And I just wanted to share just kind of here's our schedule of current and past articles we've discussed, just and I think exactly like you said, Levi, just to get the conversation started. And we're always surprised who shows up. We get people from the School of Business, School of Medicine, librarians, even from the School of Arts attending some of these topics. And whenever we talk about AI, we always get a packed house. And it's important to always include, always have tea and cookies available to that reproducibility.
I'd love to third actually reproducibility is a great resource. Some of the groups that run these journal discussion clubs also have them open to the general public as well. So even if you're not at that institution, some institutions do have them like online and stuff and let people go in. And I know they also will sometimes actually invite the authors of the papers to join the discussion. So that can be really neat for students to actually put a face to the names that they're seeing in the papers. So that's awesome. I see also there was a discussion about don't use this code, which is another great organization. I don't know if you want to talk about them, Marla, if you're familiar with them, but they've got some really great resources as well.
Sure, yeah. They have free open science training. It's like 2 half days. They run it every month. I went, I think, in August, and just sat in because I was curious to see how they present this material, and it was fantastic. And yeah, I highly encourage like you to send your students over there and get it that way.
Awesome. And then also, there's the Framework for Open and Reproducible Research Training, or FORT, has a lot of free resources available, particularly for people who are interested in training other people how to do open science writ broadly, and also for folks that are trying to learn about it as well. So all really great resources. I'd love to transition into some of the questions that we got when folks signed up. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but just curious if any of this conversation has spurred some additional thoughts about what are the best ways to reach students or PhDs when we're talking about open science.
We've had a lot of success framing it around writing and publishing. You know, a lot of our students and you know, early career trainees are really anxious about, you know, getting those first couple publications. So talking about, you know, writing reproducible methods section, a reproducible protocol. And we also, I'm planning a session for them on like less known types of papers, because they were floored that you can publish a protocol, that you can publish a data paper, and like they loved the idea that, you know, they could get extra papers out of their projects from doing the open science sessions. Like a lot of them are really interested in doing systematic reviews, and the idea like, oh, I could publish the protocol and then the systematic review is like a cheat code. Um, so, um, so, you know, some talking about like what are the advantages for publication of doing the good, the like having well-documented methods makes it easy to write your methods section. Having, you know, a good data management plan means you're more likely to have a good grant application, that kind of thing. And and we do like a quarterly writing related workshop. We don't have a writing center in the hospital, so they're really desperate for that kind of instruction. We don't do like grammar related or style related kind of stuff, but we try to do something at least related to writing. And often we're able to work open science related concepts in that way, and they really seem to enjoy it.
Whenever I talk about getting people to attend my workshops, I talk about tricking them into coming to my workshops. So by making it like focused on a tool and then being like, okay, and now let's talk data management, let's talk about open science. And so sometimes you have to accept that things that look like upskilling are more attractive to your students because they can put it on their resume or they can run with it or use it in their project. And sometimes getting them in the door means, hey, maybe I change my approach a little bit, because just titling something that you know they need is not the way to get them in the door.
Yeah, it's always so frustrating for like the handful that do show up. They're like, oh my gosh, this was so helpful. I wish like other people in my group had come to this. And it's like, yeah, me too. And I feel like even food is often helpful, especially for like students, but even like post-COVID, I feel like it isn't as big of a draw as it used to be. I don't know. And so I think this is another area where really relying on the partnership is helpful. Um, letting folks like the mentors know for the students that we want their students to come to this will be really helpful, because you can tell them like, hey, we can like help upskill your students for you, because otherwise the mentor is like teaching them all these things like how to find a journal. They can do that, but so can we, and we're saving them that time. And so I think that's really helpful, is reaching out to them or reaching out to like training program heads to get to the students and say, hey, you should go to this. This will actually value you will like you'll find some value in this. Because if you present something and you just title it like, what is open science? Then people are like, I don't know. Doesn't really sound that useful to me.
Yeah, one thing I've heard from students also is sometimes they feel like if they go, their mentor might think they're slacking. So if you reach out to their mentor and their mentor directly says, hey, if you went to this, that would be great, they're more likely to go just because they've got that permission.
Yeah, Lena and I saw this directly when we were actually doing a study on postdocs, and we promoted it all the traditional ways. And then finally, when we emailed out to mentors and we're like, hey, we're doing this study, can you encourage your trainees to come? And then we got like a bunch more people to sign up.
One small thing that we did, which had a big effect, was a lot of departments have student organized meetings, graduate student postdoc organizations, and just taking 10-15 minutes on their schedule just to talk about some of these topics usually turns into a longer conversation at these meetings.
Yeah. I'd the one of the questions that we got I thought was really compelling and perhaps may spark some interesting discussion amongst us and also amongst the folks that are here. Do we think that libraries should actively promote or just support open science? And what does that look like in a library and at a university?
I mean, I can say for us, that would be aspirational. We don't have nearly the staff or the funding to do that. In my library, we're still talking about like, we're still talking about getting our like first read and write agreement for open access. Like, I think, one thing I will get on my soapbox a little bit and say is that, you know, if researchers often want to see more from the library, especially at my institution, would love to see more from us doing like open science, but like we have no money and no staff time. So researchers can really make a difference by advocating on behalf of us, because we can tell administration until we're blue in the face that we need more resources, but they aren't going to believe it unless it comes from the patrons. So, you know,
I think it's also always helpful to have do it on your own initiative. I think it's important, but it's always helpful to have a mandate from kind of the administration that, we want you to do this, because I know when I first started the data science lab, it was a little bit of a turf war, whose remit was it, whose kind of responsibility, kind of were you kind of taking something away from someone else? And so there's a little sort of struggle at the beginning to define roles, but I mean, my philosophy is, happy to work with anybody that's interested. And I think libraries can do the same, especially if they're have not a mandate. Mandate sounds like a really strong word, but if they have a mandate to roll out some of these initiatives and then putting out a call to see anybody else at the university interested in supporting, kind of maybe rolling out a certain sort of open science technology, I think is a reasonable strategy. And it also helps with the limited resource and limited staff problem that we all experience.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what everyone was saying, like who's already doing it on campus? Is that something that you could supplement and join forces? Or if no one's doing it, do you want to do it, right? I don't think we have an obligation to do it, but if you feel strongly about it and it fits well with your offerings and you have the capacity for it, then like why not? Like I've started integrating open source tools into my offerings because I feel like that really entices people, and when I can, I do my own projects and then I can use those examples as like, this is how I did it and this is how you can do open science. And I feel like people find that really helpful. And because I've already done it and I can vouch for it, then they're more likely to come to me and ask me questions or take those examples and fly with it.
Yeah, I think that's really part of it. Like, if I'm doing instruction and promoting these things, I feel like I need to stay actively steeped in them as well as a researcher. And so I try to do different research projects that are using the tools that I'm talking about, because if I just know them at a surface level because I've just sort of wandered in and took a couple of tutorials, it's not really enough to help someone deeper into it. There was also a really interesting question in the Q&A about the idea of sharing, being open throughout the research process. Could we delve into that? You're muted.
Yep, it happens to me once a week, I think. So yeah, I think, yeah, maybe that could be our last question. I know some folks have weighed in a little bit through text, but is it this question from Amy?
Yes.
Yeah, so an aspect of open research, several years ago was that the research was open and in conversation with the research community along the way and during execution, rather than focusing just on end results, data code, articles. So that requires better technologies around crediting and provenance, things like nanocitations. So I know, Marla, you had started to answer some of this, but I'm curious if you want to tell folks in case they can't see it, and then if others want to weigh in, and maybe that'll be our last question for the day.
Sure. Just to sort of summarize, I think this is really aspirational, but extremely hard to do in practice. Most types of research, it may even be uncalled for, like too much work in order to like actually get research done. Like research already takes a long time, and by trying to do this, it might make it really hard to do. But I do think this is extremely important in like longitudinal studies where you're not going to hear about the results for many years. And also anytime you're working with humans, with patient populations, especially when the makeup of the research team does not reflect the population that's being studied, how can you accurately understand someone if you don't know their lived experience? And so having like community partners is really important. And there's been a long history of researchers from Western nations just going into developed nations and basically mining them for data and information and profiting off of it, and then not actually helping those communities. And so I think like our practices can change and then help with those types of issues. And I put in one link, but I don't think it even works anymore, unfortunately. But the National Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities had this program that did encourage community members to be a part of the active research process, part of their decision making, and I think that's really good. Also, the CARE principles for data for Indigenous populations also like center ownership of data and decisions on that Indigenous population. I think those are some models that we can follow for trying to do that work and be open throughout the process.
And I appreciate you adding this to the question, Marla, because I think this ties into the previous question, promote versus support for me, is that I don't think that we can support open science uncritically. I think as librarians, like that part of what we bring to this conversation is a community-based approach and thinking about things like, how does ongoing consent work for secondary use of data? How could that work? And things like what does data de-identification mean now in the way that it can work today? And I think a lot of those things you hit on tie to that. So I feel like within a context, yes, can be a huge part of open science, but we don't want to lose kind of the foundational principles of privacy, equity, intellectual freedom as being like what we are coming from, as opposed to purely uh, uh, propagating the accumulation of scientific knowledge. That's a slightly different purpose.
All right, thank you all for your thoughts today. I think this has been a really fruitful conversation. There's been a lot of resources that have been shared in the chat. I'm actually going to save it so that we can make sure to send that out in case anybody missed it or had to jump off the call. Then they can still get access to these really helpful resources. I hope folks are continuing to consider what open science or open scholarship or open research looks like at their institution, ways that we can collaborate across departments, with libraries, with different offices that engage in these practices across our campuses. And thank you all for developing the resources that you've also shared today, and the strategies that you've been using to make this work. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to everyone in the audience for coming. And we hope to hear from everyone soon.